The Defense Secretary of Sri Lanka, a U.S. citizen, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and the Army Commander of Sri Lanka, a green card holder of the U.S., Mr. Sarath Fonseca, are both implicated in a criminal indictment for complicity in 12 counts of genocide that is to be filed tomorrow with the United States Department of Justice, February 5th. We will discuss all about it and more in the special live broadcast today. This special show reaches millions of people around the globe through TVI in Canada, TVI On Demand around the globe, Euro TV and Vellaaveli TV in Europe, Makkal TV in South India, and through the Canadian Multicultural Radio Tamil FM, Canadian Tamil Radio, Montreal Tamil Ragam, IBC in UK, and ATBC, Australian Tamil Broadcasting Corporation in Australia. We'll be talking more about this, so stick around.
Everything's a legitimate target if it's not within the safe zone the government's created, and the only hospital is outside that zone.
Nothing should exist beyond the no-fire zone. Nothing should. How can you? This is
just to be clear. So even if this hospital is operating,
no
if it's outside of the safe zone, it's a legitimate target.
Yes. No hospital should operate in the area, or nothing should operate. That is why we clearly gave this no-fire zone.
No hospitals should operate in that area. Well, that's what Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa said. We'll find out more about what his intentions are and what the government's intentions are, or at least according to what Mr. Bruce Fein thinks. We're going to meet the former Associate Deputy Attorney General of the United States and the legal counsel for Tamils Against Genocide, TAG as you might know it, Mr. Bruce Fein. Mr. Fein, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm so honored.
Mr. Fein, that's a fine book of articles you have here. I guess we're going to talk more about this. I know it's all about genocide, and you have some cases against Sarath Fonseca and Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty details of those, let's try and establish what a genocide is.
Yeah. The definition of genocide is not just a colloquial understanding of mass killings or atrocities. There's a genocide convention, a treaty, to which both Sri Lanka and the United States have ratified, and then the implementing statute that we're operating under. It's called the Genocide Accountability Act of 2007, and you can read it in the United States Code. And the gist of the definition is any person who attempts to destroy a group in whole or in substantial part because of their race, ethnicity, religion, or nationality by extrajudicial killings, serious bodily injury, or creating conditions of life like starvation, deprivation of medicine, bombing hospitals, permanent relocations, intended to result in the physical destruction of a group in whole or in substantial part, is guilty of genocide. And under the Genocide Accountability Act in the United States, it's subject to punishment up to the death penalty. Now, the areas, of course, that we are focusing on in the indictment that led to the 12 counts of genocide are those in the north, the northeast, the south, the west, where we felt that those geographical areas were those where the genocide could be demonstrated because of the attempt to destroy the Tamils in whole or in substantial part. And then we've also got 5 village clusters that we're able to identify as being predominantly afflicted with the extrajudicial killings, the disappearances. You may recall the notorious white vans show up without license plates. They grab Tamil off of the sidewalk. They're never seen again. And this obvious effort to starve the Tamils, deprive them of medicine, create boycotts on such things as the chemical you need in order to kill mosquitoes and prevent malaria from spreading, all things that would show an intent by Mr. Rajapaksa and Mr. Fonseca to destroy Tamils in whole or in substantial part. And the other thing that this indictment stresses is the doctrine of command responsibility. We know that Fonseca and Rajapaksa aren't out there on the field doing this, but under the law, and this has been established for well over a century, if you're in a direct supervisor or commander over your subordinates, if you knew or had reason to know they were going to undertake a genocidal act and failed to act, or after the fact you knew who the culprit was and did not punish that individual, you are then criminally culpable as though you were the perpetrator. And one of the things that's so striking about Sri Lanka for 61 years is that during that period of time there's been one, I underscore only one case, where any atrocity against a Tamil has ever resulted in a punishment of any Sri Lankan Sinhalese Buddhist. One case. Now, there have been 0 cases since the Rajapakses took control in November of 2005. So that indicates that the Tamils are basically outside of the law. And we know there's this idea in international called responsibility. Every government is responsible for ensuring the safety and liberties of its citizens. With regard to Tamils in Sri Lanka, they have been ignored. They have been told, you are free prey for any Sinhalese Buddhist who wishes to assault you, kill you, detain you. You will never have anyone who is punished because of these kinds of assaults.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess we don't even have to draw a parallel between another genocide that happened during our times or anything. You've clearly stated what it is. So let's jump into the work you've done. You've got 3 books. Would you want to
I'll hold up these as well. Over 3 to 4 months, myself and very devoted staff members compiled a 1,000-page model indictment, the 12 counts of genocide. We've also added over 100 accounts of torture and war crimes. They're not quite as stark as the genocide in terms of numbers. And we've chronicled here what we think the most thorough detail of persecution, really beginning with 1948 and independence, soon followed by the disfranchisement and decitizenship of denationalization of 1 million Tamils, half of the Tamil population, and thereafter the trajectory went downward very fast as the Tamils became subject to the subjugation, almost what you call the vassalage to the Sinhalese Buddhist lords. So we compiled this based, and we recite the areas where we obtain the evidence. We have some affidavits, some eyewitnesses. We've got information that comes from contemporaneous reporting from news organizations, the BBC. We've got court documents that have been filed in Sri Lanka so that the reader can assess the reliability of this evidence. And we think the detail is quite stunning with regard to how focused on the allegation is to time, place, who was the one who was killed. So there are ways to corroborate the allegation very readily. Now there's another element to this that everyone needs to know, and that is we did not include any casualty, any injury that ensued because of the clash between the Tamil Tigers and the government. These are all civilian casualties, persons who had no connection with any battlefield whatsoever. And that's what I think makes this such a striking case. Now, the 2 other elements that are especially compelling, and that is, as you point out, these are U.S. citizens, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, green card holder Sarath Fonseca, and every country has an obligation under the Genocide Convention to ensure its own citizens, its own residents are not complicit in genocide. And indeed, the United States itself was quite vocal and perhaps angry at Serbia when it seemed lax in bringing Slobodan Milosevic to trial in The Hague for genocide and war crimes. And now also Bosnia is under the gun because one of the individuals' name is Ratko Mladic. He was a commander like Mr. Fonseca was, and they're complaining, the United States says, why isn't he in The Hague? Why is he still on the lam? Similar complaints were made when Radovan Karadzic, another one of the Bosnian Serbs who was accused of genocide, was free for many, many years before he finally brought before The Hague. He, in fact, is undergoing trial right now. But you mentioned parallels to past genocides as to what's happened in Sri Lanka. How closely can they be drawn?
Right.
And I think if we look at the last 30 days, say, or a little bit more, from January 1 to the end of January, we find almost a perfect paradigm of what happened in Srebrenica in Bosnia. Srebrenica was the place where there had been Muslims who were deported by Bosnian Serbs into this particular area, and then they were all slaughtered. It was called a safe area, even though that's sort of an Orwellian term, because it was safe only to do the killing there. And that was viewed